We're at chapter 20 in the wrong 10 seconds now, and it's over to Lydia to see how she's coping as her dad Charlie has been disgraced and her lover Paul won't speak to her. Chapter 20, Lydia, Wednesday night. Remind me why we thought this would be a good idea? Sweat studded Matt's hairless head, glinting in the fairy lights of the crowded pub garden. Beer and cider? Suggested Anna. All right, at least that is cool for the moment. Beth assented, already nose deep in her pint. Lydia clutched her chilled glass without drinking. Her stomach flipped like a weak motor. She hadn't been feeding it much, not that losing weight would make any difference to Paul. Lydia hadn't been as trim as Deb Harrow was, but he used to call her sensuously beautiful. The problem was that silly dog. Anna leaned toward her. Heard anything yet from him? Lydia shook her head. Paul still came to Robin's Hill only when he checked she wasn't working. She gulped cider to avoid speaking about what she couldn't chase from her thoughts. Are you talking about that beastly ex-boyfriend? Matt shook his head. Sweat plunged further down his cheek. I can't believe what he did. Maybe you should have let us meet him. Perhaps we have the right kind of crazy. Beth emerged from her pint. I kick him. You give him me, I kick him. She jiggled a tan little leg. The friends were forced to huddle so close together she hardly had room to raise it. Please don't worry about it, Lydia insisted. I don't wish anything bad on him. You're too nice. Anna held her half-empty glass to her face. I found my old boyfriend was chatting up girls online. I hacked his account and told them he had herpes. She held up a finger. My descriptions of his diseased privates convinced them. Matt nodded grimly. You see, if your boyfriend knew us, he'd know it would be dangerous to make us angry by ditching you. Who wants a partner to stay out of fear alone? That's not why you're with Anna. There are lots of reasons I'm with Anna. From the way Anna wriggled, her hip colliding with Lydia's, Matt must have pinched her bum. Lydia's sense of loss, sharpened by this display, weighed her stomach down, enough so she could finish her pint. I'll get another round. Lydia manoeuvred to the bar, trying not to press against anyone for fear she'd stick. All day her uniform had felt plastered on. The cotton blouse she slipped into after work seemed no better. A slightly cross-eyed fellow sidled up to her as she waited for her drinks. I'll buy you one, love. That's all right, thanks. Go on, have a drink with me. He looked about 40, a hard-drinking, battle-scarred 40, rather than Paul's gently worn, classics-quoting middle age. Sorry. Lydia clenched her change, wringing any chill from the metal into her palm. I've just split up with my boyfriend. I'm not in the mood. The man craned his swarthy neck as if the ex-boyfriend might be lurking at the door. Yeah? Who'd want to split up with a pretty girl like you? Someone married to a fitness instructor. Lydia shoved away from him, sloshing Matt's bitter onto her toes. She found her friends against the far wall of the beer garden, swept by changing tides of people. Beth shimmied in a corner with a Scottish agency nurse Lydia recognised. A hen party clucked about hair products and men. The hen herself had her sash tying her hair back as she queasily plundered her shot glass. A cluster of diamonds glinted on her finger, and a couple of her friends couldn't keep their eyes off it, oblivious to the lucky girl's proximity to vomiting. It was ever thus, Lydia pictured Paul saying with a weary half-smile. Another group surged onto the patio, Forest Dean lads on the town, their thick accents swerving recklessly through the humid air. They'd scrubbed up in long-sleeved rugby shirts, wet patches spreading from the underarm regions, top buttons undone. Matt slurped his beer. I'm dripping so much I can only taste sweat. Anna suggested, we should get chips to go with all this secreted salt. When life gives you sweat, make salty chips. I love it. You two really are perfect together. A bubble of grief floated up on Lydia's words, which she'd aimed to keep cheery. She looked away from her two friends, who looked as if they might lick each other's brows cool. Then she had to avoid watching Beth and her Scotsman practicing contortions in the corner. Then Lydia found herself observing bizarre mating rituals between the forest men and the pink-sashed hens. The lads appeared to think performing a slow, drunken bird dance to All the Single Ladies would attract more than giddiness from the girls. The other lot were so intoxicated, though, it might work. A bridesmaid was already necking a forest fellow. Nowhere was safe. Lydia gazed up at the unvarnished wooden canopy above them, strung with dingy fairy light bulbs and rimmed with cobwebs. Sorry. Anna touched her arm, then quickly withdrew in the heat. Let's not talk about romance. Or bodily fluids, even, Matt added. I'm not sure Anna knows how to converse without discussing bodily fluids, Lydia pointed out. Guilty as charged. It's why I love my job. You should have seen the monstrous poo Alice had that... Current events! Matt raised his glass and sluiced moisture off his forehead with his free hand. We can talk about local current events, since broader ones are so depressing. Originally from Birmingham, Anna sounded unimpressed. What local current events? There's the musical festival coming up. It's sponsored by the brewery, you know, where Ronald's son works. He's going to give me tickets. Florence and the Machine are playing. At least you're not going on again about canine theft and xenophobia. Well, that is the big local news. As big as Alice's fortnightly poos. Lydia gripped her glass. More sweat sprouted along her hairline. She'd read her father's interview and the pursuing armada of comments. Her friends knew she'd been brought up in a bed and breakfast. They knew her dad was American, and her mum was rather worse off than a bit poorly. Once they read the interview, they'd see Lydia was tightly wound up in the whole thing. I agree with you. It's a small matter in the scheme of things, Matt was saying to Anna. But people see it as big, and if people want to make a big deal of something, papers and social media go along. I don't understand why we have to use social media to fight trivial wrongdoings, Anna complained. It's all I saw this person litter. The car with this number plate parked badly. It's worse than boring pictures of people's babies and home-cooked dinners. Why can't my newsfeed just be a cappella remakes of Michael Jackson songs? And cat pictures, Lydia added. Because people are so pissy, especially when it's hot. Matt nodded at the side of the beer garden, where the necking bridesmaid now kicked the shin of her temporary suitor. What happened with the dog doesn't even bother me so much. The dog's fine now. The guy lost his job, which seems weird. I don't know, after just a moment of frustration. Really? Anna raised her carefully drawn eyebrows. Didn't you see the look on his face when he pushed the trolleys? It was like malice. Lydia winced into her cider. Like how Constance looks when she tries to scrub the devil out of our little ones. Matt shook his head, but even Constance thinks she is doing good. It's not impossible that this other guy thought so too. Yes, Charlie always meant well. He was incapable of ill intent, and should have earned admiration for suppressing the fury all this time. He simply needed an outlet, since cooking no longer sufficed, and nor did speaking to Harriet when she couldn't speak back. Against these accelerating injustices, could his frustration curdle into malice? Lydia couldn't help him. She couldn't deal with her own problems. Her normal coping mechanisms were moot. She couldn't sketch a pictorial allegory bleak enough for her despair. She couldn't pound the pavement hard enough to run from it, and even Eminem's lyrics seemed too confident and optimistic. Fine. Anna brought her glass back to her cheek. Why are we still talking about this then? Because, as I meant to say earlier, it bothers me he was not British, Matt explained. Times are always bad for immigrants. We must make sure to represent. This is why I'm hard on Beth about her English, because if she will not improve, it conforms with stereotypes about us. Hypocritical stereotypes, Lydia noted. We English-speaking nations aren't known for our multilingual capability, and our language is so idiosyncratic. Anna leaned against one of the beams supporting the patio roof. But don't you get tired of meeting ridiculous standards to try and soothe Daily Mail readers? My mum always says we have to work extra hard so people won't call us lazy islanders, or worse. But my dad would be like, why can't we be who we are? Why can't we just do our jobs like everyone else and then be as lazy as we want? Yes, when are you through proving your worth? Again, a swell of emotion threatened to ride out on Lydia's words. But Matt went on, when people like this immigrant, who is American, he speaks English, his country has a special relationship here. It's not as if he came fleeing a bad situation. Anna growled, have you seen who's in charge of that country these days? Matt rolled his eyes. Believe me, I know. But really, Americans, with no offence to your family, Lydia, they have it quite easy. Then this one comes along and almost ruins things for the rest of us. People are saying immigrants shouldn't be hired. Why, if they feel that way, they can come clean up massive poos. Anna laughed. No one's going to take our jobs, Mateus. Not many British people want them. Lydia remembered asking her mum if Charlie's insecurity as an immigrant contributed to his frantic need to please. No, sweetheart, Harriet had said fondly. Your dad's like that for older reasons than crossing the Atlantic. I need to go. Lydia glanced at the clock on her now too silent phone. Tell Beth goodbye from me. But Matt looked worried. Don't go. I mean, we should all go. We'll find someplace cooler. Don't tell me Beth's still with that agency nurse. She's fine, Anna placated him, then turned to Lydia. Are you sure you're okay? The night is still young. The sun's barely set. Lydia shook her head. Thanks, but I have things I need to do. I'm fine. Don't worry. Explaining she needed to help her parents would risk drawing attention to their situation, the dog thief situation. Really, she ought to tell her friends Charlie's story. They would probably be nice about it, whereas if they worked it out from the relentless commentary, they'd be angry at her for concealing it, like Paul was. She didn't have the strength to address it. She collapsed into the driver's seat of Mabel the Ford Fiesta, swamped by humidity. Her parents' bungalow was dark and cooler than the beer garden. Charlie poked his head from the lounge as Lydia shed her sandals in the entryway. What are you doing here? I came to help with the hoist. He shook his head, his glasses teetering on his nose. I did it already. Your mother's asleep. Oh, sorry. I should have come earlier. Lydia followed him back into the main room. The computer gave the only light, its keyboard surrounded by dim hillocks of CD booklets splayed open. It doesn't matter. With trembling fingers, Charlie tidied the liner notes and lyrics back into their cases. It's not that late, though. Is Mum okay? He glanced up sharply, his glasses catching the glow from the monitor's New England mountains screensaver. Of course, she feels the heat, but I'll keep her cool. Lydia heard the fans whirring in the bedroom. There was nothing in here but a faint whisper of heat deflating from the air outside, passing through the open windows. So, what are you doing with yourself this evening, Dad? He shrugged and stacked his 70s CDs one way, then another. You're not paying any mind to those comments, are you, on the interview? He cleared his throat and took out his hand sanitizer. Why did he still carry that when he didn't work at Fairford's anymore? I can't pretend it's not happening. I know, but... Sweat prickled down Lydia's back again. It might be cooler here than outside, but it was still hot. The weight settled on her shoulders. Why didn't you say more? Why didn't you tell them, I don't know, about how you're a carer too, how you don't sleep through a night and how the agencies let you down over this whole stupid thing? I can't bring your mother into this. I've left you out of it too, so don't... You haven't, though. We're going through this with you. You can't nobly face the music by yourself because you have this close-knit family that you built. Isn't that what you always wanted? Lydia had wanted it for herself too with Paul. It would have been enough. Unlike her dad, she'd have let it be enough. I never intended you to run here every morning and evening as if you have to care for me. But I want to help. He stood at the CD rack, his back to her, shoulders bowed, more listless than she'd ever seen him. I realize I made a stupid mistake, but it doesn't mean I'm incapable of looking after things. I never said you were. The interview was your idea anyway, and look how well that turned out. I didn't know you were going to sound so obnoxious, did I? Lydia stumbled into a dining room chair in the semi-darkness and draped her arms over its back to separate one sweaty part from another. She softened her voice quickly. Because I think so highly of you, Dad. He clenched his fists and they landed, heavy but dull, on the shelf. I'm not asking that of you. Just go and do whatever you want, Lydia. Enjoy the night. He'd played a part in costing her the most wondrous thing in her life, and now he was kicking her out. Lydia drove home, too hot and tired to fume properly at her father's hypocrisy. Charlie had insisted she keep her head up, never slow down, even through GCSEs when it seemed her entire year group was against her, and now look at him. But her mother had once told her, men get patronizing when they're scared, at least your dad does, So when he's the most annoying, that's when he most needs us to feel for him. Shouldn't that reporter have seen through Charlie and been kinder? Perhaps Ruby Wyatt didn't have such a wise mother or parents who understood each other so inextricably. As she parked her car, Lydia realised she hadn't gone in and seen her mum. Some great carer she was. She nearly turned back to remedy it, but she couldn't face her father again tonight. That's the end of chapter 20.